Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Club Saturn, where we're going to be talking about F1 Challenge. F1 Challenge is one of my favorite Saturn games, and it's funny because it's often derided as being simplistic or not particularly nice to look at. However, I don't see it that way for the most part. It obviously does have some cons, but it has more pros for me. So let's have a chat about it today and watch some sweet footage of F1 Challenge. Alright, let's get the pros out of the way first. So, for the most part, F1 Challenge has pretty satisfactory graphics for 1995. There's little touches like printing on the inside of the tires on the car, blurring as you accelerate in first-person view. Little details like that are often missed in any sort of racing game, so of that era. So it was nice to see something like that consistently throughout the game. Also, the cars do look pretty good for an F1 game from this era. I especially like the garage before each race. It's got a bit of detail in there, and you can have a look around and see what you can find, and it's quite nice as well. The menus are also quite nice and clean, and they load quickly, so overall, there's a lot of nice things to look at in the game. It's just not consistent throughout, unfortunately. Now, no matter what you think about F1 Challenge, you've got to admit this is a fantastic soundtrack in this game. You've got synths, you've got screeching guitars, the whole thing is fantastic, and you want to keep playing just to hear the next track in the game. So I'd say if they did one thing right with F1 Challenge, it was definitely the soundtrack. Now, the next part comes into what you can and cannot configure, and I'll be talking about this a bit more in the cons section, but there are limited but welcome configuration options for your car in the garage. So, on easy, if you're playing on easy, there isn't much of an impact on the race itself if you don't customize. However, on harder difficulties, it does tend to make a bit of a difference on, what kind of tires you use, how much gas you put in, that sort of thing. So it is nice to have that as an option, but on easy, like I said, it doesn't really matter. Now, this plays into the gameplay itself. This is the definition in F1 Challenge of pick up and play racing. It's got a kind of hypnotism to it. Once you begin to learn the curves of each track, you start to get this innate feel for the game. It's kind of a similar feeling to the one I got playing virtual racing for the first time, where the real highlight of that game is getting good at it, is learning the curves, learning when to brake, learning when to accelerate out of a turn, that sort of thing. Helping along the solid gameplay is difficulty that's pretty fairly balanced, and there's a fair amount of variety in the composition of each track or the shape of the curves in them to really keep you on your toes. So that does bring me on to the track design, which is pretty unique every time. Each track has its own specific nuances. For instance, you've got Hockenheim, which is nice and open. Suzuka's got some dead stops and really tight straights to sort of limit overtaking, so you got to think about your positioning if you are in a pack. Also, Monte Carlo is extremely tight, and you'll end up bouncing off the walls like a pinball most of the time, especially right at the start of a race. And Neo City, which is my favorite set of tracks, is like the best of each of the ones I've just mentioned, rolled into 3 separate configurations. So, if you really want to get good at it and get longevity out of playing the tracks over and over again to get best times or really see if you can smoke the competition, then F1 Challenge does have that in spades. Now on to the cons. I don't have too much to talk about, mostly 3 major points. So the first thing is, you cannot ignore the graphical issues in the game. The graphics in F1 Challenge have issues with clipping, pop-in, frame rate drops in certain circumstances. I mean, some of the textures look extremely flat and not particularly detailed. You can't even tell what some things are supposed to represent. While some elements are good, especially the ones I've mentioned, such as the garage and some of the car details, ultimately the flatness and the muted colors of the tracks, environments, and opponent cars do take a toll over the course of the game. If you use the rear view mirror, it's like at half the frame rate of the game, so I'd really recommend keeping that turned off. This is something that's quite confusing to me, but there are customization options in the game within the options menu. which go beyond what you can do with your car and affect things like lap duration and alternative views, camera views. Now, normally these would just be options in a menu. You would have them accessible. It's normally through something like an arcade mode, where you can really change these things up. Not normally a season mode, where that would be simulated, like an actual season or something. To do these things in F1 Challenge, you have to enter cheat codes, which doesn't make sense to me, because these are standard things that would be in any other racing game, but they're hidden in cheat menus. And I'll put a screenshot up of the cheats, because it's not like, just press L, hold down L and R or something. Like in Silent Hill, where you hold down the shoulder buttons and you get an extra menu. It's a cheat code. It's what you'd expect to get, like unlimited lives or something in any other game. So it doesn't make sense. If they're built into the game as cheats, why not just have them there by default? Things like lap duration should be an option, because you might just want to practice each of the tracks over and over again. You can't do that. You got to play through a whole race, unless you use a cheat, which is stupid, because if you're going to have it there as an option, just have it there as an option. Anyway, so that's F1 Challenge. It's got some problems, let's be honest. It doesn't always look great. The frame rate really takes a dive when you use a rear view, and I do not understand at all hiding lap duration inside cheat menus, but for me, the gameplay eclipses all of that. It's hypnotic. It's so much fun. The overall gameplay in F1 Challenge transcends it above any issues that I feel like it might have with its graphics, with some of its curious option choices. So if you've bought into the negativity surrounding F1 Challenge and haven't played it, then I'd highly recommend giving it a go and making up your own mind. Because for me, if you like virtual racing, then F1 Challenge is in a similar vein. So it might have something for you.